Hi, it's Mimi at Giggly Guppy. Today we're going to continue reading The Seat of the Soul by Gary Zukav. We have officially finished the introduction and now we're entering the section of the book. There are 4 sections. We're entering the second section and it's called Creation. And chapter 5 that I'm going to be reading today is called Intuition. And before we start, I just wanted to share that I've got my friend with me. That's the marvelous Mr. Mittens. So warm and cozy and snuggly. All right, here we go. The central perception of the multisensory human is that he or she is not alone. The multisensory human does not need to rely solely upon his or her own perceptions and interpretations of events for guidance because he or she is in conscious communication with other, more advanced intelligences. This does not mean that the multisensory human is relieved thereby from choosing in each instant the course of his or her life, but it does mean that the multisensory human has conscious access to compassionate and impersonal help in the analysis of his or her possible choices, their probable consequences, and in the exploration of the different parts of himself or herself. The five-sensory human is not alone either, but the five-sensory human is not aware of the assistance that is continually being given to him or her, therefore cannot draw upon that assistance consciously. The five-sensory human must learn primarily through his or her physical experiences, and this learning takes longer because lessons that are learned in this way must come through the density of physical matter. A person that needs to learn the lesson of trust, for example, will experience a distrust of others. This distrust will create misunderstandings, and these will lead to tensions and unpleasant experiences. A five-sensory human will continue to experience the unpleasantness that result. The unpleasantnesses, more than one unpleasantness, that result from his or her distrust of others until, in this lifetime or another, he or she realizes through interactions with others the source of these unpleasantnesses and takes steps to change it. If a person is not able to trust, for example, he or she will interpret erroneously the words and actions of others. If a wife tells her husband that she must attend a business meeting although she would like to be with him, and if her husband is unable to trust, he may take her meaning as a rejection or as a signal that her work is more important to her than he is. This misunderstanding results from his inability to accept what his wife has told him, from his inability to trust her. As the wife continually experiences her husband's misunderstandings, they generate within her feelings of surprise, sorrow, frustration, anger, resentment, and eventually the rejection that her husband mistakenly perceived. Thus, the husband, through the dynamic of distrust, creates his most significant fear. The loss of a mate or a friend or a colleague through distrust is not a punishment for distrustfulness. It is the result of refusing to look consciously within oneself at the issue of trust. It is an experience that results from choosing repeatedly to distrust instead of to trust. A distrustful person will create unpleasant or painful situations until at last they bring him or her to the issue of trust. This may take 5 painful experiences or 5 lifetimes of painful experiences or 50, but eventually this path will lead to and through the great lesson of trust. The same dynamic applies to every personality characteristic that is not an expression of compassion and harmony. An angry personality, for example, will create unpleasant or even tragic situations until its anger is faced and removed as a block to its compassion and love, to the energy of its soul. The same is true for greedy personalities, selfish personalities, manipulating personalities, and so forth. This is the way that we have evolved until now. A multisensory human can learn more rapidly than a five-sensory human. With the help that is available to it, the multisensory personality can understand more quickly the meaning of its experiences, how they come into being, what they represent, and its role in creating them. It does not need to experience 12 or 20 or 200 painful experiences to learn a major lesson of trust or responsibility or humbleness. This does not necessarily mean that multisensory personalities do not experience painful situations, but that they have the capability of learning more quickly from them than five-sensory personalities, and therefore are more quickly able to choose more wisely and with more compassion. It is not necessary to be capable of voice-to-voice communication, so to speak, to be able to draw upon the sources of guidance and assistance that surround you. This way is available to the advanced multisensory human, but the road to that ability is a joyful one of developing an awareness that wise and compassionate guidance is always available to you, and learning to incorporate it consciously into your life. How does this happen? The five-sensory personality accepts every impulse and insight as his or her own, as originating within his or her psyche. The multisensory personality knows that this is not always the case. Impulses, hunches, sudden insights, and subtle insights have assisted us on our evolutionary path since the origin of our species. That we have not recognized the guidance that has come to us in this way is a consequence of seeing reality through only five senses. From the five-sensory point of view, there is no other place from which insights and hunches can come. From the multisensory point of view, insights, intuitions, hunches, and inspirations are messages from the soul, or from advanced intelligences that assist the soul on its evolutionary journey. The multisensory personality, therefore, honors intuition in a way that the five-sensory personality does not. To the five-sensory personality, intuitions are curiosities. To the multisensory personality, they are promptings from and links to a perspective of greater comprehension and compassion than its own. To the five-sensory personality, intuitive insights or hunches occur unpredictably and cannot be counted upon. To the multisensory personality, intuitive insights are registrations within its consciousness of a loving guidance that is continually assisting and supporting its growth. Therefore, the multisensory personality strives to increase its awareness of this guidance. The first step to this is becoming aware of what you are feeling. Following your feelings will lead you to their source. Only through emotions can you encounter the force field of your own soul. That is the human passage in a word. The husband who was not able to trust, for example, may have felt anger or shame or resentment or coldness toward his wife when she told him of her business disappointment. No. Sorry. When she told him of her business appointment. If he had been able to experience his feelings consciously, to detach from them, to observe them as energy currents running through his system, he would have been able to ask himself, why does the news of this business meeting affect me in this way? This would have allowed him to discover that his feelings were reflecting a sense of rejection or of being less important to his wife than her meeting. If he then had reviewed his wife's message, he would have seen that she had told him that she would have preferred to be with him, but could not. This would have allowed him to ask, and why do I still feel so disturbed? And this would have led him to the answer, because I do not trust that she actually would prefer to be with me. In this way, becoming aware of his feelings rather than unconsciously acting them out, would have led him to his issue of trust. Having unearthed so much, he then could have asked himself, does my experience with my wife support the suspicion that she is not being honest with me? If the answer to this question had been no, my experience is that she is a person of integrity, the husband could have come to see that the dynamic in motion within him did not relate to his wife, although her words triggered it. It would have allowed him to see the actual intention of his wife, and his feelings toward her would have softened. Her response to him would have been one of closeness toward a loving husband instead of hurt caused by the rejection of her intimacy by a hostile husband. Had he followed this course, he would not have had to ruin his afternoon or his marriage. He would have been able to learn from his emotions and his questions about them, the same lesson that he eventually would learn through the unpleasant experiences that resulted from his lack of trust. He would have been able to see within the framework of one instance the effects of distrust and the effects of trust. Each question that a person asks, such as, why does news of this business meeting affect me this way? Why do I feel so disturbed? And does my experience support my suspicion? Invokes guidance. Every time you ask for guidance, you receive it. Every time you ask yourself, what is my motivation? You ask the universe, help me to see, and help comes. You may not always be capable of hearing the answers to your questions when you ask them, and the answers may not always come in the ways that you expect, but they always come. Sometimes an answer occurs in the form of a feeling, a yes feeling or a no feeling. Sometimes in the form of a memory or a thought that at the time seems random, sometimes in a dream, and sometimes in the form of a realization that is prompted by an experience that will occur the next day. Excuse me. No question is unheard and no question goes unanswered. Ask and you shall receive is the rule, but you must learn how to ask and how to receive. The intellect is meant to expand perceptions, to help you grow in perceptual strength and complexity and not to do harm. The experiences of the intellect are experiences of knowledge. Knowledge is power, and for each level of knowledge, you are held responsible for how you use it. Knowledge that simply comes into your being and does not, in some way or form, become processed and used to the benefit of others can have a seriously detrimental effect upon your body. Karmic obligations that are created by deliberate misuse of knowledge, by knowingly harming or creating discord in another, are greater than those that are created in ignorance. In a world that understands power as external, the intellect often functions without the compassionate influence of the heart. This creates situations in which intellectual power is used as a weapon to harm others, to exert willpower without tenderness, When the intellect is used to design or develop or produce weapons, for example, it is not being used as it was intended. When an industry or a plant is designed or built or operated without consideration for its effects upon the earth, upon human life, and upon the environment, the intellect is not being used as it was intended. When you plan to profit at another's expense, you are not using your intellect as it was intended. In a world of five-sensory humans that understand power as external, intuitive knowledge is not regarded as knowledge, and therefore, it is not processed. It is not submitted to the intellect. It is not expanded or studied or made technical and disciplined. Just as we were taught to develop and employ cognition, to think things through, so too can we learn to develop and employ intuition, to ask for guidance and receive it. Just as there are technologies to discipline the mind, such as analytical thinking, studying, repetition, and respect for the mechanism, so too are there techniques to engage and discipline the intuition. The first of these is to honor emotional cleansing at all times. If you are emotionally blocked and you cannot or you do not know what you feel, or if you have blocked what you feel so effectively that you become emotionless, you become a negative person and you also create a physically diseased body. By keeping your emotions clear, emotional negativity does not reside in you, and you become lighter and lighter. This opens your intuitive tract because it allows you a clear sense of loving. It brings you closer to unconditional love and renders you harmless. It lightens the quality of your frequency, so to speak, and therefore the guidance that you receive is clear and unobstructed as it enters your system. This requires that you clear yourself each day of your emotional impacts. Just as you dispose of your physical body wastes and toxins, so too dispose of your emotional wastes and toxins by finishing emotionally unfinished business, by not going to bed in anger, by seeing that you do not feel contaminated emotionally, and by learning to work with and to honor your emotional currents of energy. The second is the cleansing nutritional program. Being physically toxic interferes with intuition. The third is to honor the guidance that you receive. Emotional and physical cleansing leads to intuition, and this leads to learning to respond. You must be willing to hear what your intuition says and act accordingly. Many people do not wish to hear what can be heard so easily, and therefore they deny that they hear anything. The fourth is to allow yourself an orientation of openness toward your life and the universe, to approach the questions in your life with a sense of faith and trust that there is a reason for all that is happening, and that reason at its heart is always compassionate and good. This is an equal thought that needs to be in place in order to activate and cultivate intuition. What is intuition and how does it work? Intuition is perception beyond the physical senses that is meant to assist you. It is that sensory system which operates without data from the five senses. Your intuitional system is a part of your incarnation. When you leave your body, you will leave behind the intuitional, I don't know why that was so hard to say. You will leave behind the intuitional system that was developed for you, as you will leave behind your personality because it will no longer be necessary. Intuition serves many purposes. Intuition serves survival. It prompts you to pursue that which has no apparent reason in order to survive. Hunches about danger, for example, about what is risky and what is not, about which street is safe to walk and which is not, or about checking the car under the hood help you to remain in the physical world. Intuition serves creativity. It tells you what book to buy for your project. It tells you where to meet the colleague that you need to meet, and which ideas from one field will complement which ideas from another. It is the hunch that a certain painting should be done in gray or that another should be done in purple. It is the sense that an idea that has never been tried before might work. Intuition serves inspiration. It is the sudden answer to a question. It is the meaning that takes form in the fog of confusion. It is the light that comes to the darkness. It is the presence of the divine. Intuition can be thought of as a type of wiring that can be used by various sources. One of these sources is the soul. Intuition is a walkie-talkie, so to speak, between the personality and the soul. This happens through the higher self. The higher self is the connecting link when the soul speaks to its personality. It is the dialogue between the personality and its immortal self. The personality-soul communication is the higher self experience, but the personality does not communicate with the fullness of its soul. Excuse me. Pardon me. All the energy of the soul does All of the energy of the soul does not incarnate. To incarnate, the soul creates a personality from those parts of itself that it wants to heal in the physical environment, and from those parts of itself that it lends to the process of healing in that lifetime. So powerful is the energy of the soul that it could not advance into a physical form without literally exploding that form. In the creation of a personality, the soul calibrates part of itself, reduces part of itself to take on the human experience. Your higher self is that aspect of your soul that is in you, but it is not the fullness of your soul. It is a smaller soul self. Therefore, higher self is another term for soul. Yet the soul is more than the higher self. Picture a cup, a gallon, and a water tank. The water tank is the soul. An aspect of the soul becomes a gallon. That gallon is still soul, but not the fullness of the soul. It is that part of the soul that is on mission, so to speak. The personality is the cup. The cup contacts the gallon, the higher self soul, but not the full-bodied water tank. Communication between the personality and its soul is an in-house intuitive process. It is a process that is organic to your own internal system. For example, decision making, which is your process, can be an intuitive process in which you pull data from your mind, your heart, and your intuition, relying upon the guidance of your higher self. Each of these sources is part of your own system of energy. Your personality and your higher self are of your soul. Intuition also can permit the personality through its higher self to receive information from other souls of higher process, souls that are not its souls that are not its own soul. Sources of guidance other than your own higher self can come across on the same radio station, so to speak. This is not the same as an intuitive process. This is a process of receiving guidance through intuitive channels. Receiving information through intuitive channels is significantly different from receiving information through intuitive processes. Receiving information through intuitive processes is cooking at home. Receiving information through intuitive channels is ordering out. The guidance that the multisensory human receives through intuitive processes and through intuitive channels is as essential for his or her well-being and growth as sunshine and clean air. Through his or her intuition, the multisensory human comes to understand and to experience truth consciously. What is truth? Truth is that which does not contaminate you, but empowers you. Therefore, there are degrees of truth, but generically, truth is that which can do no harm. It cannot harm. Higher self-connecting to non-physical teachers produces a level of truth that is true not just for you, but that would be true for anyone who came into contact with it. If you subtracted everything that is personal to you from the guidance that you receive through intuitive channels, there would remain a kernel of truth that would apply to others, or at least the presence of unconditional love, whereas much of the information that you receive through your own intuitive process will be effectively only for you. This is the difference between personal truth and impersonal truth. They are both truth, but personal truth is yours, and impersonal truth belongs to all that is, to each person. We need truth to grow in the same way that we need vitamins, affection, and love. At times, the truth that comes through intuitive processes or through intuitive channels can be contaminated with your own fear. Here is a place to apply your intellect. In other words, you might think that you are receiving a clear intuition, but if you examine it rationally, if you take it apart, you will be able to see that you are responding to an insecurity. Just as the question, does my experience with my wife support my suspicion, would have allowed the husband to see that the origin of his emotional response was an insecurity rather than an energy dynamic with his wife. Answers that come through your intuitive processes or through intuitive channels may challenge what you would prefer to do. Your lower self, your personality, will not challenge but rationalize. It is natural to ascend to a level where you can learn to distinguish between the sources of guidance that you receive. The idea of being guided by truth that is received intuitively appears unusual to the five sensory personality. The psychology that has been constructed upon the experiences of the five sensory personality does not even recognize intuition in the sense that it recognizes and studies and seeks to understand physical perception, affect, and cognition. The multisensory personality, it is unusual not to rely upon truths that it receives from its higher self and through its higher self from souls that are more advanced. The personality is never separate from its soul, and the soul and its personalities are continually assisted and guided with impersonal compassion and wisdom. This is so for both the five sensory personality and for the multisensory personality. But the five sensory personality is not aware of its soul or the guidance that it receives from its higher self and from more advanced souls. The multisensory personality is aware of its soul. It seeks to align itself with its soul to become the physical embodiment of its higher self, and it consciously invokes and receives the loving assistance of its own soul and of other souls that assist it. That's the end of chapter 5. Thank you for joining me. I look forward to seeing you next time so we can read chapter 6, which is called Light.